Hello, I am award-winning author Dr. Jim Price, and welcome to the Purpose in Progress podcast, where purpose becomes action and growth never stops. I'm your host of the Purpose in Progress podcast show, and I just want to touch upon a little bit about what this podcast is going to be consisting of, what it's going to be about, and then share a little bit about myself as well. So, of course, I'm a Children's Award-winning children's book author. And my journey has been a little, my progress has been quite the journey in terms of a lot of things that are happening and stuff like that with me. But on the show, we're definitely going to be sharing a lot of having a lot of guests that are going to be sharing their journey and sharing their progress of how they became to where they're at now and have their success and things of that nature. Like, how did they get to where they're at? And how do they steer that? And, advice and tips and pointers that they would give for other folks that are trying to go on the same track as them. So a lot of times, we see, even with myself, like a lot of my journey kind of started off when the pandemic was going on and everybody was locked inside and had to stay home and stuff like that. During the pandemic, I was, home, and I was thinking to myself, I would like to do like maybe a social skill book because, at that time I was still do counseling, but I've been in the counseling game for a long time. And I was thinking, you know what, I want to do something around social skill building. Maybe do like a book, at least one book. I only had the idea of doing one book at the time. So, you work around and I start putting together a framework for the first book, the award-winning book, A Trip to the Park, Adventures of a Hero for the Hood, A Trip to the Park. I worked on the framework for that and eventually got to the point where I felt it was ready and everything. And once it was ready, I was fortunate enough to, get it published and everything like that. And then at that time, I had no idea about marketing and promotion or anything. I didn't know anything about it. It's like, I have a book now. Now what? What's the next step? What do I do? So those a lot of things that where I was trying to, I had to learn about the process of marketing and promotion and how that is so important in terms of what you do and, how you can spread your message. Of course, my message being, inspiring the youth to be the best version of themselves through self-love, understanding their self-worth, understanding self-care is important too. So at that time, I was very much trying to figure things out and stuff. In terms of the marketing and promotion of the books and stuff like that. So you fast forward and I start to, get opportunities to do media and in terms of promotion and marketing. And I think even in college, when I first got out of high school, my grades in high school were horrible. And when I went to college, I didn't have really too much any study skill, so I had a difficult time. But one of the things that was going on, we had to still do like PowerPoint presentations for things. And I was kind of like one who didn't really like to be in front of a lot of people. But then you think about the progress or the help, how that helped me moving forward after that. Like, I kind of learned to be in front of people and learned to kind of not be, be okay with, speaking in front of people. And then so once I got to the books and dropped the first book and everything like that and started to get media opportunities, it's like I kind of was in a better place because I was kind of prepared for that doing presentations in college. So even with that, that helped tremendously, having that opportunity to be doing presentations in college and then having that carry over to the media opportunities I have now. So I wasn't like, nervous to be in front of cameras and stuff like that. A lot of people, they're kind of like that, where they're kind of nervous and stuff like that to, be in those kind of situations. But for me, I kind of embraced those things, so by the time the first book came out, I was already thinking about a second book, and not too long after that, my second book came out, which is The Adventures of Harold from the Hood, Friends Like Different Things. And that was based on making friends, keeping friends, playing with others, in that way, that was the social lessons within that book. And then by the time the third book came out, The Adventures of Harold from the Hood, Fun Time, Lunchtime, that kind of was based on my experience of being a school counselor and seeing my experiences during recess with kids and stuff like that. Because you would go out to recess and it'd be a nice day, like today, sunny day, nice day. The kids were out there playing soccer. They were playing volleyball with you. They were playing tag, chase, basketball. Like, we had all these activities for the kids, and they were all today. It was such a beautiful day. They were all enjoying the sun. And I was out there enjoying the sun too, but a lot of times, I would see some of the interactions that the kids would have and stuff like that outside, and that kind of became the part element where Fun Time Lunchtime came about. So even in the story with Fun Time Lunchtime, Harold has to advocate for himself in terms of what he wants to eat. Like, he likes French fries, but like has to make choices about those things. And then he's eating with one of his best friends, Andy the Ant, and he's understanding and doing that social interactive thing that we see the kids do at recess. We're seeing them do it real time and stuff like that. And then of course they go outside and they're playing games. So now they have to learn how to take turns, share, all that things, coping skills, waiting. You have a plethora of social skills that happen just within that dynamic where kids are at recess and doing those kind of things. So, I mean, that was primarily, what the third book, Fun Time Lunchtime, was about. And then the newest book in the series, which is The Adventures of Harold from the Hood, When I Feel So Annoyed, is about understanding how to deal with frustration and anger in a healthy way. And I always would tell the students at school, being angry and upset is okay. It's the choices you make when you're angry and upset that causes the issues. So if you're able to problem solve and utilize coping skills or things that are in your toolbox, you're able to do those things, then it makes it more likely that you'll work through that problem and get back to where you need to be focusing on tasks, whatever it is that you're working on prior to that. And you're learning problem solving skills with other, people. So a lot of that stuff, became connected to my purpose in terms of not just being a school counselor and counseling kids and stuff like that, but also having the kids' books be a part of inspiring youth and families to be the best versions of themselves, and also to understand their self-worth, have a consciousness about understanding their self-worth, understanding, what it means to involve themselves in self-care. I know a lot of times I would say people get families, anybody get so wrapped up in the circle of just paying bills and doing this and all the responsibilities and stuff like that, that we also forget to take care of ourselves through self-care. I always make a pretty much point to make sure, however my day goes, that I at least take like 15 minutes just to do something that I enjoy myself for me. Like, we get caught up a lot of times, helping so many other people, helping others, that we forget about ourselves. And, it's hard to give you the best of yourself if your kind of energy is not where it needs to be, or, your mental's not where it needs to be, things like that. So, that's why I always feel so important to go through those elements of self-care. And even, doing something for yourself that makes you feel good, because of course, when you're doing things that feel good, that lifts up your positive spirits, and makes you feel better about yourself, makes you feel a level of confidence and self-esteem building, and all those things that happen. That could just be through aspects of just exercising, like going to the gym. Some people they go to the gym, and that's how they get their therapeutic process, and in terms of self-care and stuff, making sure they take care of their bodies, and eating right too, being able to eat right. So a lot of these parts are what's included with that, and all that is kind of connected to my purpose and my progress. And even with that, being able to network and meet so many different people, so many different parts of the country and parts of the world, and the author community is always so wonderful and grateful and graceful in terms of like helping and being okay with giving answers. Like, sometime I would want to pick an author's brain and see how they would do things when I was trying to learn about marketing and promotion and all those things. I would want to pick somebody who's been there, somebody who has experience, somebody who's been through those trenches. I would want to pick their brain to ask some questions about how do I go through that process in terms of promotion and stuff like that. Even with the networking aspect of it, you go through those rigors of everything. I remember, when I got put out of college and everything, and my dad was like, okay, now you kind of have to figure out what you're going to do. You're either going to go to college or the junior college around the way, not far away, but around the way, or you're going to get a job. And I chose to work at that time. Now, during that time, of course, I was very, relatively young and everything still. And, there was a lot of odd jobs that were dead-end jobs and stuff like that. And, I remember a particular job that really, was difficult work and everything. I used to have to run these big machines and stuff. all that stuff. So, and the machines could never shut down. You had to keep them running. So if I had to use a bathroom, I had to call on the walkie to get somebody to come and then wait for them to come so they could keep the machines running. Then I could go to the bathroom. And I remember right before that, one of the supervisor guys came over. He was a buddy of mine. He came over and he was like, yeah, I was asking where one of our other buddies were. And he's like, yeah, he stopped working here. He decided he was going to go back to school and he got his degree and everything. And now he's working over at somewhere else. And I was thinking when he said that, I was like, that's a pretty good idea. I think, that's probably something I should look into. But I kept working that machine. And then I guess I had hit my wall that day, because it was tedious work and everything like that. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was, need to use the bathroom, making the calls. Nobody was coming. Nobody was coming at all. Making the call, nobody was coming. So then I figured, okay, well, I really need to use the bathroom. I can't wait too much longer. So I stopped the whole machine and then went to the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom, I'm thinking and everything. I'm like, they don't really pay me enough to really be doing all of this. Like, what am I doing with myself? What am I doing? This is not, leading me to anything right here. So that day, while I was in the bathroom, I decided, you know what? I've had my fill. I was in my early 20s. I said, I had my fill. So I took my goggles, put them on top of the urinal, and walked out the building. I was done. I quit. I walked out. So it was interesting because, at that time, I was using my dad's car to get back and forth to work. And so some of my cousins would be working there too. And so when I left, I didn't say anything to anybody. I just kind of just put my goggles on the thing and left. And so not too long after that, because now the machines were, I had stopped the machine. So now they had to get all that going. I don't know what happened after I left. But I guess they were calling me to the main office. Price of the main office, price of the main office. And I wasn't replying or responding. And so they went to my cousin to ask him, hey, what happened? Where's he at? What's going on? He's not answering. I said, they were like, what did you do to him? Everything. And they're like, oh, we don't know. And so they pulled up the footage from the cameras outside and they caught me walking off to my car real hard. I was walking real hard back to the car. I was done. With that. And then not too long after that, that's when I was like, okay, well, I'm going to enroll back in school. So then I started at the community college level and enrolled, and my grades were horrendous in high school and stuff. I always did enough to play basketball, but I wasn't really pouring my all into the grades and stuff. So I would always do the bare minimum just to play basketball, to be on the high school basketball team. Got a state championship and everything like that. Helped get a state championship with Springfield Central High and stuff like that. So it was I just did the bare minimum. So now I had worked all these odd jobs and worked this job, and it made me really see that that's not what I wanted to do. So I ended up going back to school and starting a community college track. And I was ready. I was hungry. I was ready to do the thing. I was ready. So by the time those first grades came out, I had all A's and B's. And I'm like, my mom and dad were like, yo, you got all A's and B's? Like, what's up with that? Because, I was hungry. I was ready. When you're prepared and you're really hungry and ready for something, you will make way to make those things happen. And ironically, even after that, I was named to the National Dean's List publication. So who would ever have imagined that, considering how my grades were in high school, that I would be in college getting A's and B's and on the National Dean's List publication. They took my picture. It was a wonderful thing. They, I had a little biopsy of me in there and stuff like that. It was it really boosted my self-esteem and confidence, being like, okay, I'm seeing my progress, experiencing it and seeing it happen in real time, and from there, of course, I went on to work on my master's at Springfield College, and I hadn't yet then got to where I was thinking about working in the public school systems yet at that time. I was primarily just working as a clinical therapist, psychotherapist for adults and children, and going through the rigors of doing sessions and doing diagnosis and things like that. And I always was like, diagnosis is definitely a different kind of animal because you're studying and making sure that you're going through all these diagnoses to get it right, and having a clear understanding that when you sign the paperwork, that person's going to have that label with them for the rest of their life. So it's like such a tedious process when you're trying to go through the idea of diagnosing someone, giving someone a diagnosis, and then dealing with the insurance companies. It was a lot. I definitely learned a lot through that process, and I think a lot of that prepared me moving forward to do a lot of the things I do now. Even after that experience, I did go in the private sector for a little bit, and I was working with kids, behavioral kids in the alternative school and stuff like that. And a lot of those kids had struggles, dealing with poverty, dealing with dysfunction in the family and things of that nature. So you were seeing all that manifest itself within the classroom setting and within the school settings and stuff. So I was always one to try to be one that would listen, because a lot of times the kids just want to be heard. They feel like they're not being listened to or anything like that. They're not being heard, and sometimes that would cause them to have more outbreaks and stuff like that, of behaviors and stuff like that. So having that experience at the private school, that's actually where the idea of Harold from the Hood came from. I was doing social skill groups with elementary kids. They were behavioral too, and their attention span is not too great. So I ended up bringing in like a snail puppet. It was like a little cloth snail puppet, and I named it Harold from the Hood. And so once we got through the social lesson, I would bring out the snail and have them talk to the snail, and I also would utilize have them use the puppet to have them understand social cues. I would use the puppet to model social appropriate behaviors and stuff like that in terms of social interactions and stuff. So the puppet became an entertainment thing for the kids, but it also helped me to get them through understanding the social skill lessons better and stuff like that. Sometimes you have to do it like that. So I just never imagined back then that that idea would become like a children's book series, social book series, The Harold from the Hood. I never imagined that. But now, I'm here, and you meet so many wonderful people, and you network around and stuff like that, and all of a sudden one person knows this person knows that person, and all of a sudden it's like you're presented with the opportunity to do cartoon material. And now I've been learning the framework and the aspects of how that all works, because people think that they watch the final product of having like even a snippet of a cartoon, and it's processed because you have to go through having a script produced, think about breaking down the scenes and how the scenes are going to play out, and the lines of the characters and all that stuff. And so there's so much more to it before you even get to the putting together the animated part of it. And I'm definitely been blessed to go through the process of learning all this stuff as I go along, and growing my kids YouTube channel that's based on social skills. So my story has been quite unique. I mean, I've been able to have a lot of media exposure, and have opportunities to promote and market in a lot of different areas. That's whether it's radio, TV, podcasts, whatever the case may be. I've just been tremendously blessed to be there in those areas, in those spaces, to be able to do that. And I think, once again, it gets back to networking and connecting yourself with people who can help you push your purpose, help you make progress in pushing your purpose. A lot of times the people I would interact and meet to push my purpose would be people that maybe I was introduced to somebody, that person introduced me to this person, and this person was like, okay, well, let's have a conversation around these things and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, now you got a production company working on your animated cartoon material and stuff like that, and having dreams and aspirations for that, to paying itself out. But everything takes time. People often want to have rushed to quick success and rush everything. You have, instant grits and instant oatmeal. Everybody wants quick gratification, quick validation, fast. And a lot of times, they say the tortoise and the hare, when they have the race, the tortoise won, but it's not always about the fast, quick movement. It's about being consistent, knowing that, you're taking time, you're trying to do things the right way. And at the same time, being able to overcome obstacles and challenges in your life that, may seem challenging, but you actually can grow stronger from those challenges and facing adversity, because now you will show and prove to yourself that you can get through those opportunities, those situations, and come out on with a positive part to it. So, I mean, a lot of times we do forget that. Like, even though you go through a lot of struggle or whatever the case might be, even myself, I've gone through my struggles and stuff like that. But I've always, tried to keep a positive mindset and understand that sometimes, things don't always go the way we want them to. But sometimes things just happen in their divine timing. Sometimes, it's just not the right time. So, I mean, when I first got out of high school, went to college, it wasn't the right time, obviously, because, I didn't do too much of anything. My grades are horrible, and they end up saying bye-bye. So I learned from that experience, and then when I was really ready and really set and ready and hungry, when I went back, I just rolled up my sleeves and went to work. And you fast forward and you get into the doctorate program and you're figuring out like, wow, the time went by so fast. And you're going through the dissertation defense and, you got the panel looking at you and you're going through your presentation of all the material and the data and all that stuff. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh my goodness, you feel the pressure of, them going to ask, the panel asks you all these questions and you're hoping that you answer these questions in a way that makes things be good for for yourself. And it was just such a great thing to hear the panel say, and now henceforth your name will be Dr. Price. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've crossed that finish line. I was so glad to get there because I pretty much was, by the end of the program, I had hit the wall. I was pretty much ready to be done. And I was very emotional that day and everything like that. And I was thinking about, how my dad and stuff, struggled in the South and stuff coming up here. My dad and mom, they had the experiences in the South with the civil rights movement and had to move up here because, things were turbulent down there and stuff like that. So I think about how their life experiences are and the challenges and stuff that I faced and the obstacles that I overcome to do a lot of things I do just outside of the book, outside of the books, just get into the field of my purpose of counseling the kids, giving them guidance, helping them understand about self-care, self-worth, boosting self-esteem, all those things that are important and critical for kids in their development. So when they do get to be adults, they can be very productive citizens in the community that they are at. So of course, my purpose is all about inspiring youth worldwide to be the best person they can be, while, inspiring themselves to understand that they can grow, they can nurture themselves, and they can help others around the way. And a lot of times people will see your story and they'll be inspired your story because maybe they were going through a similar thing. And now, they see your story and now they're able to make it through and overcome obstacles in their lives that have similar connotations to it. So this podcast show will be having a lot of guests that will be sharing their story, sharing their journey, sharing how they got to where they're at in terms of things, and being able to give the audience tips and pointers of what is their journey, how did they get there, what do they consider their purpose. What do they consider being positive progress for them? So we're going to be having a lot of amazing guests on the show. And I'm happy to definitely be your guest on the show and, bring awareness and more understanding about, and consciousness about self-awareness, understanding that, we can overcome obstacles. And if you really put your dreams and stuff where you believe in what you're doing and you're doing positive things to try to get there, things usually work out because, the universe always, puts at you, how they say, you get what you put out. So a lot of times if you're putting out the positive in the universe and you really die hard about working on, maybe it's a new business, maybe it's a new podcast show, maybe it's writing books or whatever it might be, sports or whatever. When you put things in a positive framework and you look at it from that way and have a self-conscious, a consciousness of understanding, awareness of being positive, then you can overcome the obstacles and stuff you need to reach that goal. And I mean, you start with one small goal and another small goal, all of a sudden you reach the big goal. And for me, the doctorate program was kind of like that. I took small steps, and then all of a sudden I got to the big steps. So there's going to be a lot of exciting guests we're going to be having, sharing their story, sharing their journey, sharing how they got to where they're at on their journey to purpose and progress with our show here. So I appreciate the audience tuning in, and we're going to be having exciting guests, like I said. And of course, if you want to check out my material and stuff like that, also, you can go to my website, Jim Price Books Education. That's Jim Price Books on Education, where you see all my cartoon material, all my social skill books for pre-K through fifth grade. I also have activity books that are educational, that supplement the books and stuff like that. So for school teachers, counselors, all that families, a lot of that material can help in terms of your child nurturing and growing their social skills, which is part of my purpose as well. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next time, and we'll have a fabulous guest to share their story on the Purpose and Progress podcast with Dr. Jim Price. Thank you for joining us, and have a blessed, wonderful day.